Welcome to the Ignite Donuts podcast, episode number 10. Today we'll be talking about human resources, and we'll dive into that topic. We have Chris here who will be joining myself, and so you have an extra person this week, Chris.
Hey, I'm not solo. Look at that.
Yeah. I thought you did a good job last week, impromptuing it and talking about SpaceX. I think that's a very interesting company, and they're only going to grow in at least the next couple decades.
Yeah,
I foresee. So
they could really be like the company of the future because their whole mission is to go to Mars, and so if they actually are the ones who colonize Mars, they could literally like define the future of humanity. So they're an interesting one to watch. But we're not talking about that this week. This week we are talking about something far more down to earth, shall we say, human resources. So human resources, that is a large umbrella topic, right? So that covers like payroll, employee management, I guess, or employee relations. What else? Like what does our human resources do? That's a good place.
Yeah. So I think in our specific and unique situation, our human resource manager is creating the content for the future of our business in a way. Like SpaceX is creating the path for the future of space travel and space exploration, and our human resources creating the platform and the foundation for the journey of future human resource managers.
Just a lot less complicated.
Yeah, right. And a part of Ignite Donuts with a lot less engineering per se. So essentially, our HR manager has created different documents, whether it's written up reports, evaluations, interviews, an employee handbook, contractor handbook, volunteer handbooks, policies like social media policies. There's so many different documents that we need as a company to save our butts per se, and allow us to establish a culture and allow us to establish a different vibe that we're trying to create here at Ignite as opposed to other businesses.
Right.
And I think it's very interesting. And I'm glad that we have an HR manager, because I feel like we're in limbo sometimes, we need that one person or a couple of people that understands the business from the backside and allows us to reel us back in and say, hey, we need to cross all of our T's and O's here, and just make sure that we are all on the same page for doing everything legally and the right regulated way. At the same time, building relationship. That's what an HR manager really is trying to do, is build a relationship. So that's how I would specifically define that in a way. But any other ideas that HR managers do outside of what we talked about?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking like the HR like representative. It's an interesting step for, I feel like, a startup company, because most startups, they start with like one person or a partnership or maybe three people, and then they're the entire business. And that's even how Ignite started. So when you only have, 5 people on the team, it's a little silly to have someone who does all this, works with employees. It's just the owner. But there comes a point where you need someone, like you said, to write this stuff down, like the policies and the employee handbooks. It's the difference between, just kind of working it out with your friends to help you sell donuts out of a food cart and actually creating an infrastructure and a system that will grow with the business. And I'm just trying to think, like, I feel like that's a pivotal point in a business, is when you decide, like, hey, we should actually write some stuff down as opposed to just have the owners do everything. So I don't know at what point it's important to have an HR manager. I guess that's an interesting question. I guess suppose once the owners become too busy, I don't know.
Well, I think going back to what you said, we didn't have an HR manager, I think, till 2 years going into the business, around 2 years, I should say. And so at that point, we created a product, a service, and started creating a business model and started our business in itself. And then we were too big, to your point, to micromanage and manage everything at that level. And it's a unique situation because we still were doing everything, and we were mean, the interesting part with us is like we're guiding the student into their degree because they're pursuing HR. And then on top of that, like, you know, we are trying to build that foundation for next semester so they can just go into their role and be fine and understand their role in general.
Yeah. Well, that's a unique thing for Ignite. And something we try to do is, because we're student run by students, you know, we try to actually get students in the position they want to be in when they graduate. So, and it's not an official internship, but your job at Ignite hopefully will train you. So that's something we have to deal with, is the training too. But I think that's an advantage for us too, and what makes us unique. I'm just trying to think, like, yeah, so we wrote policies for hiring, firing. The employee handbook was a big undertaking. That is a large document, you know. Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak on the employee handbook. Why have an employee handbook? Like, why bother? You know?
Yeah, so I touched on it in regards to the specific culture that we're trying to establish here at Ignite. I mean, we go over our mantra, we go over our values and our purposes, as well as our mission statement and our vision. And from a employee's standpoint, people read through these page by page and just flip the pages because they don't really care.
Right, sign the end.
Yeah, but in reality, like all those different topics really speak to what Ignite is doing. And unlike a lot of these other businesses that say that they are community oriented, all of our actions that we do are honestly, like, they're followed up, and they can be rooted with the employee handbook. Like,
right.
Just,
There's something physical to back up your actions, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something that they signed. I feel like a lot of these documents, you don't think you need them until, like, you actually need them and you don't have them.
Yeah.
So that didn't really make sense. But what I'm saying is, you find yourself in trouble, and it's really bad when you don't have these documents in place. So I think it's we haven't not had any problems with our employees. Let me get you wrong. Ignite Donuts employees are great. We love you guys. If you're listening to the podcast, especially you, Ivy, HR manager. Anyway, they're great. But if there was a problem, we can be like, you signed the handbook. You know, we have that backing. And so I think that's good. I'm glad we didn't I'll be honest, when we started doing the employee handbook, I'm like, this is a waste of time. You know what I mean? Like, why are we doing this? But now I realize, hey, this is good because we're protecting ourselves, basically. So.
Yeah, and not only are we protecting ourselves, like, we're creating a precedent in what we want going forward with our company.
Right.
Looking at it from the positive aspect of it. And it's not something, you know, we're going to hold people against too. Obviously, we have it to protect ourselves. But in reality, the employee handbook protects the employees.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so I think that's the overall arching goal here, is so that both sides are protected, that no one is overstepping each other based on what we have on there. And it's following the regular regulations that the state and federal law says. In addition to that, it has our own spin to it on other areas that we can do. And I think that what's important too, Chris, is like, some businesses create their employee handbook before they create the business. We created the business and the culture before we created the employee handbook. So it actually allowed it to be seamless and allowed it to flow. And that's where, like, everything is backed up, because we've established the culture here already. We don't need to change the culture to a large extent by any means. We don't have a culture problem. We just have a documentation issue, and that was solved with Ivy, our HR manager. So I think that's very vital and very important. And so I'm glad we took that step. And from a lot of different perspectives, like, it is a lot of work. And so, but I'm glad we did it, because now that's one less thing we have to worry about.
Right. I do think that's interesting. We're almost defining the culture of the company. You've said that over and over and over again. And I guess that really reveals the true purpose of the employee handbook, you know, is to protect the employees, but also define the culture of the company, which is really important, especially for us. I think at Ignite Donuts, we like to kind of pride ourselves on the culture and we like to maintain it. So yeah, it's a good thing to do. I think it's good that we did it after we started, you know,
Yeah.
because we had a culture defined. We already knew what we wanted to be because we were already that thing, I guess, if that makes sense. So I don't know if you want to dive into this. The last thing I want to talk about related to HR is payroll.
Yeah.
So our HR person doesn't do payroll, but that's a very common HR thing to do. So I feel like we've kind of had an adventures in payroll. I don't know if you want to talk about like some of the options that we have looked at for payroll, and then
Yeah,
kind of,
definitely. Yeah. So from a small business owner perspective, typically you have about 3 options that you can go about this. If you have employees or if you're paying yourself, you definitely need to have a payroll system. For the easiest but the most expensive system is find a local CPA, a certified public accountant, and have them do your payroll. It's going to cost you a lot of money per person per month if you go that route. But the nice part is if they mess up, the liability is on them,
right.
and you don't have to worry about anything. So if the IRS wanted to audit you and they realized that there's a document that was incorrect on the finances side or on the payroll side, that's not on you. That's on your local CPA or your CPA wherever you have it.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, if you use the next option, which is the medium ground, which is a software service, so Intuit or Square or other
Mm-hmm.
services that have different payroll services, they'll essentially meet you halfway, and they still take the liability to some extent, but you still have to fill out all the forms yourself.
Right.
There's a lot of different forms that you have to do. There's different forms that the state and the federal government regulate and require each individual person to sign when they get hired. So any job that anyone has ever had, if they've done it in a legal standpoint, they have to sign like 4 or 5 different forms.
Right.
And some of those forms might be to see if you're eligible to work in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They want your social security number, like to say that you're a U.S. citizen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different forms, and even the state of Michigan has like a specific form saying that you're a resident of Michigan. And so you need to register each person by whichever state you're in if they have those regulations. And then that's a middle ground, and those cost anywhere between $35 to $60 per person per month to do the payroll. On top of that, you're going to have withholdings from the state and federal government, so Medicare as well, and your FICA taxes. So essentially, if you're getting paid $10 an hour, and that's your hourly rate, you're not getting the $10 an hour every single paycheck. You're getting the taxes deducted on that. And so the money that's withheld on your pay stub is held by the company. And so like here at Ignite, we withhold money, and then we send it based on a periodic system to the government. And so all businesses that do it legally have to go the same route. Mm-hmm. You can pay the government if you have a lot of money. You can pay the government through the withholdings on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. And so there's a lot of different avenues on that side. Right. And then the most complicated, yet the least expensive option is to do everything yourself. So to get the documents and make sure that everything's paid on time and appropriately. You take all the liability, take all the responsibility. But the problem with that is, do you really know, as being an owner, it's like, did you fill out every single form? Did you have every employee fill out every single form? What if you have 20 employees? That's over 100 or so documents that you need. And so there's there is a lot of work involved
Right.
in payroll.
It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It
So
just keeps going and going. So I guess it really depends on how complicated you want to make it for yourself. You know, in this case, you're really paying for convenience. I mean, I feel like I guess the third and final hardest option is free, unless your sanity has a monetary value. In that case, it might not be the best option. Yeah, it's expensive, and I guess I do want to address one thing before we close out on payroll. At least is independent contractors versus employees. This is a pretty common thing, and you see it, like, for example, I'm a shift shopper. I'm an independent contractor, so the as a startup, you can get into a trap if you are hiring your people as independent contractors and not employees. So let's back up here. What's the benefit of that? If they're an independent contractor, you don't necessarily have to pay them. You don't have to withhold the taxes in the same way. It's much cheaper for you as the employer. You do have to send them a form, technically, like a 1099, I believe, once a year. But that's a lot simpler than W-2 stuff over and over again. The problem is you cannot set their terms of employment, really. I mean, you can, but you can't define the way they work, I guess. And they have to use their own assets to get the job done. So for us at Ignite Donuts, that doesn't work because we tell a lot of our employees to show up, at 7 o'clock, we're making donuts, and then you go home. Like, if we're telling you to show up, you're not an independent contractor. Now, if we said our employees or our contractors, if they were contractors, to use their own mixer and just hit a quota of donuts whenever they felt like it, maybe then they would be a contractor, but that's not how it works. So,
yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on the contractor versus employee. Don't break the law. That's my hint.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses take advantage of that.
Right.
They have an advantage over other businesses. Like, you see Amazon, they did that at the very beginning with their delivery drivers. The delivery drivers got into a lot of accidents, but it was never on Amazon because they were contractors. Same thing with Uber. Uber and Lyft became in a huge, the taxi industry was mad at Uber and Lyft because they Uber and Lyft found their way in, which was through the contractor side. That's how they had the edge over the taxi industries.
Right.
And so Uber ended up winning. However, since then, like, they've been guilty of some, I guess I would call it contractor fraud in California and other locations where they have resulted in huge $1 million fines. But so it's a pretty risky decision. If you have a question about it, speak to a professional, speak to a business owner. I think that's my takeaway on that.
Don't listen to the Ignite Donuts podcast. This is not legal advice.
Yeah.
It's entertainment, not legal advice.
But we can always share our experience and our advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we'll do it for free too. So
yeah,
but
it's free.
Would you like me to close it off, Chris?
Yeah, I think I've said everything I want to say about payroll and HR. It's an important thing to have, and it's kind of up to you as the business owner when you decide it's ready to have an HR person. So.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this is the 10th episode of the Ignite Donuts podcast. I have Chris Aiken here and myself is Casey Crowd. And if you have any other questions in regards to human resources, or if you are interested in any volunteer positions here with Ignite Donuts, please reach us at ignitedonuts@gmail.com or find us on any social media platform. We're on them all, and you can find us, and we would love to have a conversation, regardless if you are interested in working with Ignite or just have some questions about HR. We love you all. Thank you. Have a good night.